choice of engines for the Grand Scenic 4 is the same as for the Megane 4. The minivan did not have any charged modifications and a version with a rechargeable hybrid power plant. But there are versions with a 1.5 DC engine with a hybrid assist function, and these a belt-driven generator can also work like a motor, giving a little power to the engine. 1.5 DC, K9 K110 horsepower. Actually, the most common engine in imported Grand Scenic 4 engines is the good old cast iron 1.5 DC. It does not turn the connecting rod bearings, although some owners of new Renaults are not averse to updating them at the turn of 150,000 to 200,000 kilometers. This is not the most expensive operation. The 1.5 DC engine of the latest generations has been thoroughly improved and modernized. By the way, there are versions without AdBlue. If you come across a car with this system, then you shouldn't be afraid of it. It's not that capricious and problematic. If something happens to it, then specialists in this car brand will help you turn it off. When operating a 1.5 DC engine, you should expect trouble with the thermostat gasket. This is associated with a coolant leak. The tube to the pressure sensor in front of the particulate filter may burn out, or the intake air temperature sensor may fail. Sometimes through rubbing of the inlet pipe is observed. The EGR valve should be preventively cleaned every 100,000 kilometers to prevent it from jamming at the wrong time. The fuel system as a whole is not a concern. There are rare cases when Siemens injectors begin to act up from time to time, although when run on a fuel test bench, they function perfectly. In this case, their ultrasonic cleaning with complete disassembly helps. 1.6 DC, R9M 130, 165 horsepower. A more modern engine with a displacement of 1.6 liters is less common on the imported Grand Scenic 4. It is more powerful and equipped with a timing chain drive. Experts advise trusting Renault cars with this engine if its cylinder block has been replaced, under warranty, with an improved one. Experience in its operation has shown that there is a high risk of cracks in its cast iron cylinder block. Cracks appear from the crankshaft main bearings and penetrate deep into the cooling circuit. Due to cracks in the antifreeze begins to leak into the engine oil. An improved cylinder block for the R9M engine appeared in 2019. The improved block number begins with the characters E4, E4, or D4, D4 if intended for the Bitturbo version. In general, the 1.6 DC engine is more expensive to operate. The timing chain will have to be changed. Lambda probes are not very durable. The high-spirited twin-turbo version is equipped with a troublesome EGR cooler that can crack. The result will be either an antifreeze leak or a strong diesel exhaust smell. The 1.6 DC engine also loses contacts in the injector connectors. Simply cleaning or even unplugging and reattaching the connectors brings the injectors to life. 1.7 DC, R9N 120 horsepower. The very fresh Renault Grand Scenic 4 received an even newer 1.7-liter turbo diesel. So far this motor has not caused any complaints. The choice of gasoline engines for this minivan surprises with tiny turbo engines. There is a choice of 1.2 and 1.3-liter turbo engines, 1.2 Terrace, H5 FT 130 horsepower. The younger 1.2-liter turbo engine was produced from the very beginning of the production of this model. It survived a recall campaign to replace the timing chain, but after that it generally served without problems. This engine may consume oil due to stuck piston rings. 1.3 Terrace, H5 HT 115 horsepower, 140 horsepower, 160 horsepower. Later, another turbo engine was added under the hood of the Grand Scenic 4, which is more powerful, faster and also has hydraulic compensators in the timing drive. This is the same 1.3 Terrace that appeared on the Renault Arcana, Captur and the new Duster. So far this motor has only attracted approval, not concern. Manual transmissions on Renault Grand Scenic are reliable and durable. Sometimes there are problems with the clutch master cylinder, it simply leaks fluid, after which the clutch cannot be released. DW5 7-street preselective gearbox, DW6 6-street preselective gearbox. 2-pedal Grand Scenic 4 were equipped only with preselective transmissions, such as DSG. They have a double multi-disc clutch, and the transmission itself is designed in such a way that it keeps two gears engaged, even in odd. Switching between them to transmit torque is carried out by engaging the corresponding clutches. These transmissions are created by Getrag. Paired with the 1.5 DC engine and turbo petrol units, a 7-speed DW5 was installed, and with a 1.6 DC diesel engine, a 6-speed DW6 was installed. 1 liter of original 7,711,785,243 for DW7 and 7,711,579,456 for DW6, Oil for these automatic transmissions costs about $70. The 7-speed holds about 3.5 liters, and the 6-speed holds 7.5 liters. There are quite a lot of oil analogs for DW6, you can save money. The oil and filter need to be changed every 50,000 kilometers to keep these transmissions long-lasting. When used in them, clutch frictions wear out and contaminate the oil. Clutch packs aren't cheap, so it's best to change the oil periodically. In practice, these preselective transmissions last 300,000 kilometers before replacing clutches. By the way, all Renault Grand Scenic 4 engine options, regardless of the type of gearbox, are equipped with dual-mass flywheels, which traditionally cost more than $500. There is not much space under the aluminum hood of the Grand Scenic 4, which is thanks to its single-volume layout with the windshield moved forward. The motor is half under it and under the front panel of the cabin. Even replacing the air filter requires some skill. For some service work, it is necessary to remove the drain under the windshield and the windshield wiper trapezoid. Pay attention to the cooling fan, it should rotate silently and without play. If it is noisy and loose, then its bushing can be filled with grease. If possible, it is worth replacing the bushing. True, you will have to order it from a turner. In rare cases, the ABS unit may malfunction on these machines. It turns out that the problem with a bunch of errors in the brake system can be cured by cleaning the contacts in the electrical connector of the unit. Sometimes the cause of errors is a jammed brush in the commutator of the electric motor of this unit. The air conditioning system of the Renault Grand Scenic 4 suffers from freon leakage quite often recently. In almost all cases, freon leaves the system through the seals, 7,701,208,363 of the lower tube to the inlet of the air conditioner radiator. Sometimes cracking of this tube near the mounting pad is also observed. The air conditioning system of these cars is filled with expensive and rare Freon 1234U, but it can be completely replaced with the most common Freon R134A. With a mileage of about 200,000 kilometers, the rubber dampers of the engine mounts may become tired. If vibrations and shocks begin to be felt when starting off and when changing gears, then you need to carefully inspect the lower motor mount 112383734R and change it if necessary. The original will cost $80. The upper engine mount, 8,200,902,955, is clearly visible from above. Its damper should be intact, with a good gap between it and the bracket. Roughly speaking, the engine should not roll to the right. Diesel Grand Scenic and other Renaults have a damper in the exhaust pipe. It is installed closer to the front. The damper is driven by an electric drive, a motor with a gearbox. Often this damper jams, due to wear of the motor itself in its drive. This whole problem is known from the third generation of Scenic and can be solved simply. The drive must be removed and make sure that the damper remaining in the muffler moves without jamming. If it sticks, any penetrating lubricant will help. Then you need to drive the gearbox without turning it off. If it jams, then it needs to be disassembled and the motor replaced. The motor is selected according to the markings on its body. Many Grand Scenic 4 owners notice creaking in the front suspension. After this, chaotic replacements of a number of parts usually begin. Usually they start with stabilizer struts, 546182227R. The original costs about $70. Then they try to change the stabilizer bushings. In general, it is better not to touch the bushings because they are vulcanized and are not sold separately from the original in principle. If the stabilizer bushings have not burst, they will not creak. Then the support bearings come in line for replacements. The original ones, 543258271R, cost only $40. So owners are willing to buy them and replace them. True, replacing the support bearings has no effect on squeaks in the front suspension. But if, when driving over uneven surfaces, the front suspension of the Grand Scenic 4 makes a dull knock, but does not creak, then the source of the noise is precisely in the support bearings and in the damper supports located above them, 543207020R. When further searching for the source of a squeak, rather than a knock, in the front suspension, the attention of Grand Scenic owners is drawn to the front shock absorbers, 543022368R. The original ones cost $300, but a complete analog off the assembly line can be bought for $100. After the replacement, it turns out that the suspension continues to creak on potholes and when driving over speed bumps. By the way, to remove the shock absorber strut on the left side, including to replace their supports, you need to remove the windshield wiper trapezoid motor. These are features of a minivan. So where does the creak come from? It turned out that the creaking appears when the shock absorber bump stops. 540505177R. Rub against their rod. To overcome the squeak, you need to lubricate the front shock absorber rods in their upper part. where the bump stops sit, with any grease. The silent blocks of the front levers need to be replaced when cracks appear in them. If you do not pay attention to their tired condition for a long time, a knock will appear in the front suspension. Original new levers, 5,455-6711R, will cost $400 each. Silent blocks for them and ball joints can be purchased aftermarket. In general, the chassis features of the Grand Scenic 4 are the same as those of the Megane 4. Front wheel bearings, 402024-1A, are sold together with the hubs. The rear wheel bearings are pressed into the brake discs, 432029176R. By the way, to replace the rear brake pads, the rear calipers can be separated without a diagnostic scanner and without tricks with the 12-volt supply. There is a service mode, which is activated by manipulating the pedals and the handbrake button. The body of the Grand Scenic is fine. We think that no one will see corrosion on these machines in the next 15 years or more. The hood is aluminum, the front fenders and the trunk lid are plastic. They are not at risk of rusting at all. The paint layer is of high quality everywhere and does not fall off. The back door of these minivans sags over time. Its lower edge begins to touch the bumper. Sometimes a touch point appears at the rear light housings. Overall, if your tailgate gaps are less than ideal, go to a car specialist to have your hinges adjusted. It's inexpensive and quick. After 3 to 5 years, the rear door stops weaken and no longer hold it properly. The original gas struts are a bit expensive, so the owners found a replacement. The struts from the first generation Santa Fe, 8,137,220, are perfect for this. Let us remind you that if the rear window washer stops working, you need to clean the connecting fitting of the tubes. You can get to it by removing the trim at the rear of the ceiling of this car. The fitting becomes clogged with sediment from the washer fluids used in Europe. On many cars, the taillights sweat. Water penetrates into them through loose seams between the plastic lamps and housings. If this bothers you greatly, then the seams need to be covered with a good sealant. Daytime running lights in the headlights may stop working completely or begin to shine dimmer. This decorative problem can be solved by replacing the DRL module or resoldering the LEDs. On cars with keyless entry, this function begins to malfunction when the door handles, the driver's side in particular, become covered with wet road mud. This problem makes itself felt in the autumn-winter period. Treated by cleaning door handles, the controls of the spacious interior of the Grand Scenic 4 are borrowed from the Renault Megane 4. The finishing materials are not bad, but the Dermantine inserts wear out over time. Cracks appear both on the manual transmission shift cover and on the seats. The instrument panel, in other words, the speedometer, is buggy if it has been altered to improve the mileage. We were told that glitches can be removed by flashing the original scanner. This service is provided in Minsk by specialists, not dealers. A cool thing about Renault of the latest generations is its native R-Link multimedia. A system with small screens can be replaced with original higher-level devices with a large vertical display. Any questions regarding upgrades, firmware, or map updates are also easily resolved by Renault brand specialists. We also advise you to check in the summer whether the climate control unit is faulty in manual mode. Set the temperature to 16.5 degrees. Select the airflow towards you from the front panel deflectors. If suddenly hot air starts blowing from the two deflectors on the driver's side, and the deflectors on the navigator's side start to cool, then either there is not enough freon in the air conditioning system, or the climate control unit simply needs to be reflashed. In most cases, what is needed is flashing the unit. It can be done at dealer or Renault specialists with a brand scanner.